Morning all, I have another very interesting game of pool Morphy, which I think is quite instructive. It's against Daniel Harrwitz, played in Paris, France, 1858. Let's have a look. E4 from pool Morphy. We have E5, knight F3, D6, the Philidor defense, which has a reputation of sometimes being quite passive. We have D4 here, E takes, Queen takes, not minding the tempo gain, but this is the main move now, just to pin the knight and be prepared to exchange off the bishop for the knight after the unpinning. This is a pretty standard move, and it means actually white's got quite a good grip on the position already. There's quite an interesting centralized queen, quite an interesting grip on the d file with that semi-open file. We have this now a forcing move, bishop g5. Perhaps black should consider the very, very tactical response, bishop e7 here, even though that seems to neglect g7. Here we have bishop f6 and a sharp continuation. It seems could result, let's have a look at this sharp continuation, very, very sharp continuation, could result in equality here, funny enough, which means, you know, maybe this is technically possible. Instead f6, which is a pretty committal move, weakening the light squares. We see now bishop h4, knight h6, knight c3. White stands very, very comfortably from this opening and could even consider casting queenside here to keep the pressure on the d file, or more pressure on the d file, but he castles kingside. Bishop e7, rook a d1. After castling, now we have check, rook f7, and point here, knight d4. This is getting to be quite a high pressure position for black. Knight g4, trying to use this e5 square. That's allowed for a moment, h3, knight e5. The queen drops back, knowing that f4 will increase white's space advantage, and maybe also support something like f5 and knight e6 later, which could be a very horrible entrenched knight. Perhaps black should just simply allow these possibilities and play queen c8 here, but we have another committal, very committal, even more than f6 move. We have g5 weakening, in particular f5. So can pool Morphy exploit these weaknesses? But you might think, well, hold on, black's the one with the light squared bishop. White hasn't got a light squared bishop. Is it that easy to exploit the light squares here, like f5? Bishop retreats for a moment, and the knight just jumps in now after rook g7. The knight just jumps in with tempo. And here, you might think this is a bit of a strange decision, justifying black's rook, but pool Morphy in fact plays f4. Very interesting judgment here to play f4, because in one respect it seems to allow, you know, some g-file activity. You can imagine the king moving, but with the entrenched knight on f5. But furthermore, when black took here, after rook takes f4, we have these kind of fractured pawns as well. So if white can cope with the dynamics of the g-file, black's pawn structure is a bit wrecked here. King h8, preparing to use the g-file. Rook h4, basically saying the g-file is not worth too much, I can defend it, and in fact tactically I might have stuff going on h7. And that's the case here actually. If black plays a move which doesn't address h7, let's just say black played this, white has a forcing sequence, taking, not taking when the pawns of the pin, of course. Can you see what white could play here in this position? I'll give you 5 seconds. Yeah, rook takes h7, check, and this would be devastating for black. Yeah, just everything's falling apart. So black has to actually, even though he's got the g-file, it's his h-pawn which is actually quite vulnerable here. He plays bishop f8, just safeguarding h7. Now bishop takes e5, removing black's best piece. And with that interruption, there's no g-file pressure in the immediate future to worry about. This seems to repair black's pawns though, doesn't it? And give black the full bishop pair against the two knights. Rook f1. We have now the move queen e6. And now, actually, almost like exploiting a weakness of the last move opportunistically, that c7 has been neglected. In fact, white's move is knight b5. Now, black doesn't really want to give up this light square bishop because that would weaken the light squares generally and leave this really entrenched knight on f5 without any possibility of taking it off later from a bishop at least. So black actually goes on the offensive with queen g8, at least doubling like this on that g-file road. It is actually possible to take c7 here. For example, this wasn't played though, rook c8, for example, knight d5, giving back the pawn. If the option to give back the pawn here is taken, then this position is good, because actually that is strategically fantastic for white to get rid of the light square bishop. White is a little bit better here. On knight b5, that's a disaster. That does justify, in fact, black's g-file after taking check. Can you see what black could do here, which is devastating? If I give you 5 seconds. Okay, check. Yep, check. And this would be mating white as an example. So yeah, white's got to be a bit careful behind the scenes here. And he did play the cautious rook f2. We have now a6. And now this is taken. Rook c8. Knight d5. So yeah, this route is used now. Bishop takes, e takes. Now here it's not actually possible to take on d5 in this particular position. It's somewhat different here. Can you see why? What has white got here? Here white has rook takes h7, check, and knight e7. Yeah, it's pretty subtle stuff actually, because the g2 pawn is protected. So this tactic's now possible, and it's devastating. For example, like this, it's absolutely devastating. That's crushing. So that is just winning a pawn basically, compared to the other variation. That's a major upgrade. White is a pawn up with an entrenched knight on f5. Now after rook c7 we have c4, cementing that pawn. Attacking the rook moves. Queen e8. But now black's position falls apart. White's play, really powerful move. Natural move in many respects. What would you play? Okay, forcibly creating a weakness of the last move, basically c5. Threatening cd, winning material. If takes, then there's d6. So black takes with the rook, which neglects e7, so forcing a neglect of e7. So now, white's play beautiful stuff, this c5. So black's kind of weakened e7 with this. Equal on material again for a moment, but now, can you guess? Rook takes h7. Now if the king moves, yeah, the bishop's dropping off. That has to be taken. Check. King g8. Knight takes e7 check. King g7. Now what do you do here? Do you take the rook? Isn't that potentially leading to a rook and pawn ending? Do you take this rook? What do you play here? White's play. Okay, knight f5 check. Causing neglect of g6 here, and accentuating a pin in this position, the rook against the queen. Note all this time that this rook on f2 is really, really handy, because black's, even if black had a move here, it's not threatening this because that would be check. But anyway, it's white to move here, and can you guess the final move? Knight takes d6 actually. Just trying to remove the defender of g6. Black resigned here. This is pretty hopeless. As noted, you know, rook takes g2 check is reacted with a check here. Otherwise it would be winning the queen sometimes. There's nothing black can do in this position. He's losing further material. We can check with a good bit. It's just for final check. There's a choke and check here. Then what? Nothing. This game actually seems... What is fascinating about these lesser known Paul Morphy games is the positional play is actually really quite good, as well as the tactics on the light squares, giving up the light square bishop. The decision for f4, in some ways you might think it's controversial, you know, giving back this g-file, but with the entrenched knight on f5 it meant that the g-file activity wasn't that significant, and more significant was black's fractured pawn structure, especially the h7 pawn, which was subject behind the scenes to a lot of, you know, rook takes h7s, which had to be taken care of. But the interesting thing also, the play on the queen side with knight b5, just almost taking opportunity of black's queen move. So taking on c7, causing trouble on the queen side, with that knight retreat coming to d5 later with an improved variation, winning a pawn. It's all quite beautiful stuff, actually on both sides of the board as well. So a very fine game, I believe, even by modern standards. A really beautiful game here. What do you guys think? Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks very much.